Good.
All right, gang. So we're at 8 o'clock. A good meeting starts on time, someone told me, so we'll get it kicked off. Thank you, those of you who stuck around and those of you who came in. We do have a big book meeting just before this from 6 to 7:30. If any of you would like to join us next week for that. All right, so I'm an alcoholic member of the Three Legacies group. My name's Joe.
Hey, Joe.
May we please start this meeting with a 1-minute moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. A preamble, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Three Legacies Group preamble. Here at the Three Legacies Group, we believe in the 36 principles found in our three legacies of unity, recovery, and service, the valued treasure that has been handed on to us by our fellowship's pioneers and past members. Having been saved from the pit of alcoholism, we now endeavor to pass these on to the still suffering alcoholic as the basis for a contented and useful life in sobriety. We have two readings from AA's Legacy of Service by Bill W. and Chapter 9 of Family Afterward from the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. Jesse, you want to put this up? All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service.
Jesse, alcoholic.
Yeah, Jesse.
Like a gaunt prospector, belt drawn and over the last ounce of food, our pick struck gold. Joy at release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load, which will pay dividends only if he mines it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. Our 12th step, carrying the message, is the basic service that the AA fellowship gives. This is our principal aim and the main reason for our existence. Therefore, AA is more than a set of principles. It is a society of alcoholics in action. We must carry the message. We must carry the message, else we ourselves can wither, and those who haven't been given the truth may die.
Thank you, Jesse. All right. Is there anyone new coming back or visiting who'd like to introduce themselves?
James, alcoholic from North Kingstown, a drunk squad.
James, welcome.
Thank you, James.
Tom Yammer from Pawtucket.
Tom, welcome. Good to have you. Would anyone who's had a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps and is willing to assist someone new just coming back or who's looking for a new experience, please raise your hand to identify yourself. Thank you all. And may we please have the collection observe our seventh tradition while some announcements are made. If anyone would like to join this group, please just stick around and see me after the meeting. Our business meetings are the last Friday of each month. Just in between our big book meeting and this, we have a big book study from 6 to 7:30, and then the half hour in between we have our business meetings on the last Friday of the month. This group does have two commitments monthly. We're down at AdCare in North Kingstown on the 5th Wednesday, and up at CCA in Providence on the 2nd Tuesday, both at 7 p.m. If anyone's interested in joining us, just let me know. This group does have a private Facebook page and a public YouTube channel where we post speaker tapes and announcements for events, 12-step calls, things like that. There's details on the bottom of some flyers in the back of the room if you're interested in those. We don't have any anniversaries tonight, but does anyone else have any AA-related announcements?
Jesse, alcoholic.
Jesse?
Richie Bob, Rhode Island Service Committee of Young People in AA. We are having a business meeting tomorrow on Post Road in Warwick. I don't remember the exact number, but I have the flyer. If you're interested in getting into some service, we are bidding for NECPI, which is the New England Conference of Young People in AA. There's a bunch of service positions open. If you want to be of service, see me after the meeting.
Thank you, Jesse. And lastly, as an AA meeting open to alcoholics and non-alcoholics alike with recordings that are publicly available, we'd like to share a quick reading on anonymity from our 11th and 12th traditions. 11, our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There's never need to praise ourselves. We feel it much better to let our friends recommend us. 12, and finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice a genuine humility. This to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. Our speaker will now have the floor until about 5 of, and at this time, we do ask that you please silence your phones. And at this time, we ask that you please help us welcome our speaker for this evening from the Daily Reflections group out of Wakefield, Rhode Island, Mike L. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate having you.
Thanks, guys. My name's Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate being invited to come down and participate and share my story. I think I was invited. Did I volunteer? Yeah, it worked out. Here I am. I told Joe before, I said, the word must have got out, man. Everybody took off. It's okay. For those that are new, reasonably new, I saw a couple guys raise their hand. I hope that something that I might say, or maybe something that was heard earlier, will buy you a little bit of time, maybe to ask yourself some questions, get to another meeting, participate, get a sponsor. The preliminaries. I took my last drink sometime before November the 12th, the year 1980. I didn't know it was my last drink. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, it wasn't my first time. I'd been struggling with coming in and out of the program for 4 years prior to that. I do have a home group. I attend the Daily Reflections meeting. It meets at 7 o'clock in the morning, every morning except Sunday in Wakefield, Peacedale. I get up about 6 o'clock in the morning, and as they say, the 60 or 65 in my case may be the new 45, but 8 o'clock's the new midnight. And lucky for me and you guys, I got a little nap this afternoon, so I should be alert. I got some rather disturbing news yesterday. My youngest son, who's 26 years old, lives goes to the University of South Florida. Called me up on the phone, and he said, the first thing he said was, "Dad, I'm all right." And as soon as he said that, I knew something's wrong. So hope he hadn't been arrested. He's a pretty good kid for the most part. He said, "I have testicular cancer." And, they've diagnosed me. I had some swelling in my groin area, and I came to the emergency room, and they sent me to a urologist, and they're going to do surgery tomorrow, which was today. And I didn't know how to respond to that, except I was in shock, of course. But he had the surgery today. He's fine. It's okay. He's fine anyway. I mean, he's over here. He's telling me about it. And I'm the guy that panics. Like, what? Wait a minute. Who's the surgeon? Where's the hospital? But this particularly aggressive type of cancer that can spread very rapidly. So he needed to have the surgery. He did that, and it's all fine. I slept last night. I took a nap today. I carried on my activities. I don't know how that works. You see, I'm a guy that's riddled with anxieties and fears. And when something happens to one of my kids, I don't know how that, how does that work? He was in God's hands. The whole bit's in God's hands. And the longer I hang around this Alcoholics Anonymous, the more I understand that we're all in God's hands. We stay close. We try, practice these principles. My problem did not begin when I took my first drink. My problem began at some indeterminate time during my childhood. I can't tell you when. I can't even accurately describe just what the problem was. It was connected with a lot of fears and feelings of inadequacy and alienation, and I don't fit in, I don't belong. I can't tell you much about it. I can tell you when I found an answer. And I could do that with as much lucidity as I can tell you what happened yesterday. We stood in the back alley of my schoolmate's house. He stole 8 cans of beer from his father. My schoolmate's name was Kelly Gilman. Now, I don't remember anybody else from the 8th grade except Kelly Gilman, right? We're 14 years old. He's bigger than me. He's tougher than me. I'm a scrawny little kid. And I want to impress Kelly Gilman. So he pops a cap on a beer, takes a guzzle. I pop a cap on my beer, took a guzzle. He took another. I followed. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th beer, I became just as big and tough as Kelly Gilman. We ended up getting in a fight. No surprises, right? He pummels me, it's over real fast. I did something else that night. I asked a girl out for the date, and she laughed at me, okay? And I woke up the next day, and I couldn't wait to start all over again. Because, you see, I had never been in a fight, and I had never asked a girl out for a date. I was alive. This stuff put life in me. The best way I ever heard described that first alcoholic experience from an alcoholic came from an American author by the name of Thomas Wolfe. He talked about, he said, I knew about drunks. They stagger down the street, they can't talk, they do foolish things. He said, but until I took that first drink, no one had ever told me that there was such a thing as a God in a bottle, and that you could drink the contents of that bottle and become that God. That's what happened to me. It's not supposed to happen. If that happens, you're in trouble. Because alcohol's not really an answer. But you couldn't have told me that day. You couldn't have told me that for a number of years. See, everything changed out here, but nothing really changed. It all changed in here. But I looked out here and everything changed. And the interesting thing about that is that when we talk about the solution in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're often talking about how everything changes when we get a different perspective. It's how we see things. There's a famous line that some of you may have heard. It's actually a title to a book that a man named Chuck Chamberlain wrote called A New Pair of Glasses. And that line comes from a statement that was made by a man by the name of Father Ed Dowling, who's an important part of Alcoholics Anonymous history. Father Ed was a Jesuit priest who was actually Bill Wilson's spiritual advisor. And when they're talking, now Father Ed was not an alcoholic, but he would talk about the emotional wringer that the alcoholics went through. And he would say things like, I never believed, and this is a priest talk, I never believed until I started watching you people and seeing what happened in your lives in Alcoholics Anonymous. But he says once in the course of a conversation, he says, sometimes I have to believe that heaven is just a new pair of glasses. And we listen to that around here, and we've heard that. If you're in Alcoholics Anonymous for a while, you're going to hear that again, time and again, is altered attitudes and a new perspective. It's a disease of perception. We'll hear those things. My perception changed entirely when I put alcohol in my body. And I didn't care about the side effects. I got in trouble at home, I got in trouble at school, scrapes of the cops, fake IDs. I didn't care about any of that. By the time I was 16 years old, I was a full-blown drunk. Blackouts, the whole bit, in trouble, expelled from school, the whole thing. Didn't bother me any. It's working. It's doing this thing that I could not do. it's making me, as our book explains it, allowing me to act extemporaneously. I'm alive. When I was 18 years old, I got a DUI. We're in the state of Ohio. And in the state of Ohio, they just toughened their drunken driving laws. First offense, 10 days in the county jail. Fine, suspension of your license. So I got pulled over, state police, breathalyzer, took me to jail. In Athens County, Ohio, they have what you call a bullpen style jail. A bullpen means it's just one big room. And here's cute little Mike Lancho over here with the golden blonde hair coming down over his shoulders in here because he got drunk. And over on the other side of the room is a guy that stabbed his mother 85 times. I'm not going to make it 10 days in the county jail in Athens County. So I go to get arraigned the next day, and the judge says, he tells me 10 days in the county jail, fine, this. And he says, but we'll suspend the fine and the jail sentence if you attend this 3-day alcohol awareness program on the campus of Ohio University. So my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous comes as a result of an ultimatum from a judge, right? I go to this program, a couple days into this program, you parade these alcoholics in there. Now, what I remember about these guys is they were all men, first of all. They were all old, and they all had short hair. And it was absolutely nothing cool about short hair in 1976 America, right? I did not want what they had. I listened to them. They were earnest. They were nice fellas, all well and good. And while I was listening to them, I was comprising a list of people that I thought belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. So my stepdad being number one on the list. And I left that thing, and they asked me at one point, they had a counselor talk to me, and they said, do you ever have a lapse in memory when you're drinking? And I thought about that, and I said, well, I've woken up on a porch in a front yard, in jail, I don't, already. But I knew it was a baited question, right? And I said, no, right? And they said, well, that's an alcoholic blackout. That's what they call that. And so I left there. I said, Alcoholics Anonymous is wonderful, but not for me. I'm too young. I'm going back to the party. See you later. And so it was. My problem, along with so many other problems, was that I was a very enterprising guy. I had a business, and my business was selling marijuana. And for those of you who may not remember, there was a time when selling marijuana was not legal. Right? So I tried to sell an ounce of marijuana to an undercover state cop, and I got busted. And they took a couple of ounces off of me, and they charged me with possession with intent to sell. And right around the same time this was happening, one of my other businesses was starting to cave in on me, and that was taking things that weren't mine and reselling them. And there were a string of burglaries going on around my town, and a detective was asking me about, what I knew about that. And he had no idea how hot on the trail he was. So for the first time, I realized in my life I have a problem. And I got to have an answer for the problem. And my answer at that time, and for many years to come, was I got to get out of here, right? So before the charges became official with the marijuana, and something came down with the burglaries, I went down to the Navy recruiter. And in 1977, they would sign just about anybody up for the military that knew how to sign their name, right? So I was in. And they said, at that time, I think the ad was, it's not just a job, it's an adventure. But for me, it was an escape, right? So I got out of town. And I got out from under this stuff. I spent 2.5 years in the military. I got in a lot of trouble. I was court-martialed. I spent time in a brig. One particular ugly incident came about when I was supposed to be restricted to the ship. And I had jumped off the side of the ship, and we went down to the enlistment's club and got drunk, and then it came back, and I ended up getting into a fight. This violent incident. It was so bad that they woke the captain of the USS Concord up, and he held a special captain's mask just for me. And I'm here, and I got blood on me, and the other guy over here, I got a fight, that's got blood all over him. And it looks bad for me from every angle. There's no explanation for what happened here. And this captain who's just furious, and he's not even awake yet, and he just looks down at me, and he says, what is your problem? And only because I had nothing else to hang it on at that point. I said to him, "Sir, I think I might have a drinking problem." And long before people were saying, "You think you might," all the time, he said to me, "You think you might." And he says, "How do you like bread and water, Lonchar?" And he sentenced me to 3 days bread and water. They still did that. Okay? And when I was finished with that, I was ordered, it wasn't suggested, I was ordered to the alcohol rehab clinic, the Naval Clinic in South Philly. And I went there and I got sober. And I don't know, I stayed sober through the program. It was 6 weeks. They had us take an antabuse every morning. That might have helped. I came out of there. I went back to the ship. And the guys, one of my shipmates gathered around me and said, "Gee, Mike, you look great, man. You needed to stop drinking, man. You had a problem and you look great and you're fine. We're going to the enlisted men's club to have a few drinks and shoot pool. Why don't you come along? You can drink ginger ale." I thought that was a good idea. And it was a successful experiment. It worked the first couple of times. Maybe the third time I was there, I'm not sure. I finally, my ginger ale just, gathered a little bourbon into it or something. And I'm off and running again. The short end of that is that the military decided that they did not want to send me to another rehab. My behavior had become more and more bizarre and strange, and I was talking about jumping off the edge of the ship. So the ship's corpsman sent me. We were on a cruise at the time to see a psychiatrist in Naples, Italy. And the psychiatrist, now, mind you, in 1977, 1978, you could not get out of the military. I mean, they did not let people out, And I was I had a hit list of things I had done. I'd been court-martialed. But I'm telling this guy, I said, "Look, I don't get off that ship. I'm going over the side where somebody else is going over the side." And this guy was a little younger, so he couldn't tell if he was being bluffed or what was going on. And he basically looks at me and he says, "You want out of the military?" And I did one of these, Are you talking to me? I've been trying to get out of the military since I got in the military. And I got out of the military. And I went back to my hometown, and as the book sometimes describes it, I sought lower companions. And my brother, who was a particularly tough kid, was involved with a gang. And I got involved with these guys. And things were pretty ugly. It reached a point where this place was a garage apartment that the three of us were living in. We could pay the rent between the three of us. We were just drunks. We were drunk all the time. There were big parties. And it was ugly. And soon I was just out on the streets. It was crazy. And I was out one night, and I'm drinking in one of the clubs that our gang frequented, and a rival member came in, and I fingered him. And I went to one of the more violent guys who were a part of the gang, and I said, "Jim, this guy Donnie Buckley just came in." He says, "Really?" So he took him outside, dragged him outside, and started beating on him. And he beat on him pretty good. And then he held him down, and another of the more violent guys in the gang takes out this thing called a slapjack, which is this leather contraption with two weighted discs on each side. And he started beating on this kid until he didn't get up. We all went back in the club. And somebody came in a few minutes later, and I said, "You hear it? Donnie Buckley, man, he got his ass kicked out front." And the guy says, "Donnie Buckley's dead, man." And that was more than I could bargain for. And I went to this guy, Jim, that had dragged him outside, and I said, "Jimmy, Bucky's dead out there." And he looked at me with his cold eyes, and he said, "Good." And I got scared. I got real scared. And it was another one of those times when I said, "I got to get out of here. This was not what I wanted to do." And in fear, I called my mother on the phone, and I said, "Mom, I'm in trouble. I will not testify against these guys in this." And she says, "What are you going to do, Michael?" And I said, "I got to go somewhere, Mom." And she bought me a one-way Trailways bus ticket to Las Vegas, where my father was living. Now, I'll tell you what being in Las Vegas is like for a drunk like me. It's like your bottom's close, Las Vegas reaches up and grabs you and pulls you down. Because there's no locks and there's no clocks and nothing ever closes. And I hit a bottom really, really hard. And the funny thing is, of all of the disastrous things happening, and by the way, this kid never died. He was in intensive care for a long time, but he survived. So that wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was still there. In Las Vegas, I remember going out one night, and it had been happening for quite a while now, where I would set out to get drunk, and I would take those drinks and I would wait. Wait for that God, to come up in me, wait for that magic to happen, wait for that feeling. And it wasn't happening. And one of the last drunks I ever remember, I was just, a cab driver was standing over me and yelling at me to get away from his cab because I was vomited all over myself on the stoop of his cab. And he said, just get out of here. And I crawled into the courtyard of this place where I was staying. And I woke up the next morning, I had to vomit, my shirt soiled, my face is beet red. You can't be in the sun very long in Las Vegas, Nevada, unprotected. I mean, I was just scorched and burned. And my dad says, he just shook his head. And I said, I don't feel good. He said, you don't look good, kid. And something happened in the midst of this brother of mine that had been in the gang. My brother was, his world was even tougher than mine. He grew up in reform schools and prisons. And he'd gotten sober. And he'd come back east, and he got sober, and he came back out. He came back out specifically to talk to me. He knew that things were bad with me. And I was in rough shape. See, when alcohol doesn't work for me, I don't have another answer. I'm done. This has to work. And I talked to him for a while, and I remember in the course of the conversation, he's talking to me about God. I don't want to hear about this, And in the midst of this, I sort of jumped up and I said, listen, I don't live this way because I want to. I don't know another way. He says, there's another way. And for me, the other way, I said, I had half convinced myself that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't work for me. See, I had had a couple of rounds of sobriety, but it didn't stick. But I didn't do anything. I went to some meetings, and I thought I was a member. And I was there, and I thought, something, osmosis, it doesn't work that way. So I was half convinced of that, but in those moments when my brother was there, and I said, maybe I've never given this an earnest try. I need to go back. I made that phone call the next day, and I started going back to meetings, and for 2 weeks I just went to the meeting every night. I didn't say anything. I just sat in the back, by the door, ready to escape. When they started talking about God or anything that made me uncomfortable, and a lot of things made me uncomfortable. The reality is, I didn't really, I was there, I had God, but my God in those moments, in those first weeks, was gift of desperation. For the first time, I was in AA by my own choice, and I was desperate, and that was why I was there. And I'll tell you what, man, a couple of months down the road, I wasn't desperate anymore. A couple of months of the raw knuckle sobriety, grinding it out. I read things out of this book. I went to the next meeting, and I repeated them. And I didn't feel anything about them. And a man came up to me at one point, and he says, gee, kid, you're picking this stuff up fast. That was the worst thing he could have said to me. See, I was a whiz kid, I was what they call the 90-day wonder. I got this, right? But I didn't believe, man. I didn't believe any of what was going on. I didn't know how it really affected me. I believed I was an alcoholic. I knew that. There's plenty of evidence for that. I finally went to a guy, and I said, a guy I respected who was around close for a while, and he says, and I said, listen, you're talking about God around here. I said, I'm not sure I even believe this stuff. And he listened to me. He says, listen, kid. He says, you don't have to believe anything around here. He said, but there are some things that you need to do. And if you do these things, you will come to believe. And like I said, and that helped me. That bought me some time. If I didn't have to believe anything, and all I needed to do was, if you told me, say, make the coffee, Mike, or empty the ashtrays, I understood those things. If you said, believe in God, I didn't know what you're talking about. I was lost with that. And being the enterprising guy that I was, and being jobless as I was, I was in an AA meeting one night and said, we need a treasurer. And I volunteered. At the end of the meeting, I collected $25. And I thought, I could take this down to the casino, play a little blackjack, and double it. I could put the $25 back, and then I got some cigarette money, you know? And of course, that experiment didn't work very well. But I tried it the next night and the night after that, and pretty soon I was into the group for a little bit of money. And I had a problem, and I knew that, and I said, well, I'll become the treasurer of another group, right? And followed suit, you know, the same thing. And soon I'm into, you know, a couple of AA groups for, you know, $150, and I don't have a job, right? And I went to this guy, Frank, who's my sponsor. And I said, Frank, listen, you know, here's the story. And he says, well, you know, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go back to the groups, and I'm going to apologize and, you know, tell them they got to get another treasurer. He says, oh, you're gonna make an amend, huh? I said, yeah, that's right, you know, an honest program here. He says, let me tell you something. He says, a financial amend is not, I'm sorry. He says, you got to put the money back. I said, well, I don't have a job, Frank. He says, well, it's time to get a job. You know, you can't hang around the club playing pinochle all day. So and I'm a guy, I'm a high school dropout. I'm a military reject. I don't have any trades. I don't have anything. I don't know anything. And he says, what you're going to do is you're going to go out here and you're going to fill out applications. You're going to leave the rest to God. Just fill out applications. That's the footwork. Let the rest take care of itself. Got a job soon. Wasn't a very good job. Didn't pay me very much money. It allowed me to pay for my own cigarettes and allowed me to put together enough money to go back to these groups and pay them back the money that I had absconded. And the interesting thing is, I went to one of the groups and I said, you know, here's the money I owe you. Here's what I did. You know, this is what happened. And the group unanimously voted that I continue to be their treasurer. And something choked up inside me, and I realized that, you know, this is pretty sincere and pretty earnest what's going on around. These people care. Now, I'll go on to tell you that, you know, it did not give me a psychic change. It did not revolutionize anything in me. I was still the same guy. You know, I was still dishonest. I was still skirting around. I was still trying to bluff my way through fourth and fifth steps. I went through sponsors like they, you know, like they were wives, you know, they one to another. I'd become unsponsorable in AA. Everybody kind of knew, you don't sponsor this guy, doesn't do anything. You know, he just goes to meetings, he tries to pick up girls. You know, that's all he does. And but I was hurting inside. You know, I was kind of coming apart, you know, because I wasn't working any kind of program, and I was an alcoholic. And a drinking drunk is about as bad as you get, but a dry drunk isn't a whole lot better. You know, there aren't any promises happening in your life when you're not doing anything around here. You're just taking up space, and that's kind of what I was doing. I didn't intend to do that way. I just didn't know the answers. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And I had a girlfriend by now, which made it worse. You know, she wasn't even staying sober. So we were hanging out, and I was trying to help her. I was trying to save her, and I couldn't even take care of me. So my early sobriety, the first couple of years of my sobriety, were pretty disastrous, you know. But at one thing I did well and completely, and that was step number one, or at least part of it. I didn't pick up a drink. And I had heard and bought into the simple idea is that, you know, if you don't pick up the drink, you have a chance. Finally, after a couple of years of this, I had gone to a guy that was pretty strong around the program, and, you know, he showed up at a lot of meetings and he did a lot of service work, and I asked this guy to be my sponsor. And I remember him kind of, you know, tongue-in-cheek with his eyes rolling, you know, and he said, yeah, you know, because he knew me, you know, he's Mike, you know, Mike doesn't do anything, you know, who knows, he might steal something. And he says, can you take directions? And I wanted to get off on the right foot with this guy, and I thought for a minute, I said, I don't know. And he said, that's okay. He says, you got to start coming around with me, though. And he started dragging me off to St. Vincent's and hospitals and Salvation Armies and meetings like that, where I could see that for the grace of God, I was sober and I was alive. You couldn't tell me those things. I mean, you said things like me, hey, you got 2 arms and 2 legs. I didn't get that. You know, I couldn't get any gratitude out of it. I didn't get any traction with that. But when I went and looked and I saw and I started to try these things, and after a while, and I told him, I said, He said to me, Mike, you're really angry about a lot of things, aren't you? I said, nah, not really, you know. He says, really? He says, well, you're always being pissed off. Well, things piss me off. He said, those are called resentments, Mike. You got resentments. And I didn't know what a resentment was. I looked at the book, and I could read things out of here, and I said, well, yeah, I know that. I get that. I comprehended up here, but nothing came down into my heart. I didn't get it. You know, it was as though they say the longest journey to man's from the head to the heart. Things weren't coming down here. And I looked at the fourth step diagram in the book, and I couldn't make heads or tails out of that, man. I didn't know any Mr. Brown. You know, I didn't know what an expense account was. You know, it was all a foreign language to me. And my sponsor, Bob, says, here's what I want you to do, man. He says, you're going to take this pocket notebook around with you and a pen, and when something pisses you off, you're going to write it down in the notebook. You don't have to write a big story about it. Just put it down. That's a resentment. And in this way, he kind of showed me how to make a list of resentments. And after we had done that, we moved over, and he said, here, tell me why. Why are you mad? What happened here? And we moved over. So what part of your life is this affecting? And he walked me through the fifth step. And by this time, I developed enough trust in another human being that I was willing to tell the truth. See, I tried to bluff my way through these steps, especially the fourth and fifth step. I was going to tell you anything you didn't need to know, right? I'm certainly not going to tell you anything that makes me look bad. I didn't mind telling you things like I was a thief or that I was a drug dealer, but I didn't want to tell you what a sleazebag I was. I didn't want to tell you that I had violated the trust of the people who loved and cared about me. I didn't want to tell you those kind of things. That I had stolen money from my mother. I didn't want to say those things. And I was finally able to bring myself to tell the truth to this man. And it was liberating. And he walked me through the sixth step and the seventh step. And we got around to the other steps and we kept moving. And he showed me, you know, how Alcoholics Anonymous worked. And he introduced me to this book, and we read it, and we went to a big book meeting. Now, my life in this program is nothing short of miraculous. I struggle. You know, I have alcoholism, and I didn't know what alcoholism was. I didn't know what alcoholism was years into this program. I thought it was drinking. I operated under the delusion that I could wrest happiness and satisfaction out of life if I just stopped drinking and managed well. And it didn't work. It didn't work for me. And so when people would say things like, if you're an alcoholic, alcohol is not your problem, I could start to understand what they're talking about. And that was key for me. I had to understand that. Because I didn't know I had to do these things. I didn't know I had to do these things to survive. And they're necessary. And they're necessary to continually do them. And I could tell my mother, I remember doing my ninth step, and my mother was top of the list. She got the calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, we got him in jail again. He's rolled another car over, he's in the hospital. She got those calls. And I went to her, and I stole money from her. And somehow or another, my mother just sort of knew. She knew enough about what was going on with me to know where I was coming from. She saw me coming. And she said, Michael, I know what you want to do. You want to tell me about these things, and you're sorry. And I don't want to hear it. So I don't want you to return any of the money that you've stolen from me. And this was after I was sober like 3 years, over 3 years. She said, you're doing well, and I'm proud of you. And you don't drink anymore, and you're not destroying yourself anymore. You were so unhappy, and I was so worried about you, and now you're doing fine. And I went back to my sponsor and said, what do I do with this? She doesn't want any. He says, you're going to do a living amend, and you're going to continue to do it. And you're going to call your mother, and you're going to let her know that you're still sober and you're still happy, and you're going to stay sober. And that's the amend you make to this woman that loves and cares about you. And that's what I learned. See, when I came to the ninth step, my sponsor said, look, there's 2 lists here, man. There's this one list, the short list. The short list is all the people that you love and care about, and the people that love and care about you. You're going to get on that. This other stuff over here, the people at the bar or this or that, you may never see them again. You're not going out looking for them. If you run into them, you're going to make amends wherever possible. And that's what I come to understand the ninth step. The eighth and ninth step. I got married after I was sober for 9 years. My wife and I were like AA sweethearts. We went to the conventions together. We did everything together. We ended up having 3 children. And after 26 years of marriage, my wife stopped coming to meetings. She started drinking again. We divorced. And that may be the most toughest and most intense thing that I ever went through in my life. It was a divorce from my wife and separation from my children. And during the course of this divorce, my wife turned my children against me. She told them all these things that I wanted and I was going to take, and I was going to do this and I was going to do that. And I went to my sponsor and said, look what she's doing. I got to plead my case. He said, no, you can't do that, man. He said, you don't talk about the terms of your divorce to your kids. And I was going to lose them, I thought. And I don't get to do this. I'll tell you today that I have a wonderful relationship with all 3 of my children. And it's not because I pleaded my case. It's because I didn't. I took the honorable road. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to survive around here. I knew I had to. Now, people will say to me often, people outside of here that don't understand what my problem is, why do you still have to go to AA? You haven't had a drink for forever, Because my problem isn't drinking. It's alcoholism. And if I forget that, and I start thinking that I can get along again, it's just a matter of time. Now, about 4 years ago, my new wife and I, my second wife, are starting to figure out what we're going to do with our finances. And I decided I wanted to get this life insurance policy so I'd be able to take care of my kids if something happened to me. And it was a routine physical involved in it. And the nurse came over to my house and took blood work and did these things. And I got a notice from a week later that said that we can't give you life insurance because your PSA numbers are very high. And the PSA blood work numbers are indicators of prostate cancer. And mine were double digit. So I went into a panic over this. And I took the steps that I knew I needed to take. I went to the urologist. They did tests. They did back and forth. Eventually, they did a biopsy. And the biopsy showed that I had prostate cancer. And the oncologist said, you have what we call low-grade, slow growth. We don't have to do anything with this right now. We're just going to watch it. And I said, okay. So 6 months later, I had to do another PSA test, and they said, it's different now. It's gone up some. It's now what we call intermediate. We need to treat it. And as all of this is happening, I'm doing the things that I know I need to do. For whatever the reason, maybe it's fear. It's drawing me closer to these principles that I live my life by. It's drawing me closer to God. And the 11th step is taking a whole different meaning in my life. And I started to have, for some reason, whenever something bad happens to a guy like me, I always think, why me, right? And I wasn't asking that question. I was just doing the next thing that I needed to do. And asking where I can be of service and how I can be an instrument of thy peace. Just a little over a year ago, at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York, I had prostate surgery. And post-surgery report was it's all gone. Got it. 6 months, and I just got the 1 year report, it's all gone. So I'm a cancer survivor. But I'm a cancer survivor because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I don't handle things. That's not the way I operate, you know. When you talk about tools, I got a sledgehammer and a pair of pliers over here. I don't, you know, that's the way I operate. How does it work, you know? So, you know, I was at the convention, recent convention over in Newport a few weeks ago, and listening to some of the speakers, and one of them says something. There was a couple of things that, you know, I'd never quite heard before, but you know, they're like gospel to me. There's one thing that I was I don't know if I was maybe a year sober. I was shopping around for sponsors again, right? I found myself in California for a brief period of time. And for this brief period of time, I'd actually run out of town because of my gambling problem, right? And I had met a guy, and someone had introduced this guy to us that also had a gambling problem, and he thought like maybe 2 gamblers will help like 2 drunks, but it didn't help. We gambled all the time, right? And finally he says to me one day, we can get out of here, man. My parents got a place in LA. We can go down there. Let's get out of here. You know, we got to go. We're broke now. And we get to LA, and I don't know anything about this guy. You know, we were, you know. So we get to LA, and I look, and there's his parents' house, and it's this big Tudor mansion-y looking place, right? And there's a pool in the backyard, and beyond that there's a little cottage, and that's the guest house. And I'm thinking, Jesus, man, I arrived. This is like Beverly Hills or something, right? And but his father was a very strong member in Alcoholics Anonymous in the Pacific group, right? He was actually Clancy's right-hand man. I don't know if you know this guy Clancy, right? But it's a very strong AA group. And I did not like his father because he was a very intimidating guy. And I was a guy that wasn't working a program. I was just kind of skirting around at that time, a year sober. You know, when I knew he was gone, I would sort of slip into the kitchen and I'd grab a bowl of Rice Krispies or something. I don't want to. So I'm in there one night and I'm doing this, and he appears in the doorway, and he's like, "Hey, here's my house guest. I hadn't seen you for so long. I thought maybe you moved on." And he says, "I'd like to have a word with you." I don't want to have a word with this guy. He's like Keith Carpenter, you know, is like this. Used to be an offensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers. Now he's some kind of high-powered salesman that does not take no for an answer. But I'm cornered. So I wind up in his office, and he's sitting there behind the desk, and he says, "Look, kid, straight shot." He says, "I don't want you here." He says, "I don't want him here either." And behind him, there's a big wall of windows, and I see his son, my friend out here at the pool, you know, with his sunglasses on. And he says, "But I'm going to let both of you stay here under 2 conditions. One is that you look for a job every day, and the other is that you go to an AA meeting every day." So I agree. You know, you do not disagree with Keith Carpenter. So he's kicking me around. He says, "You got to get a sponsor. He's not going to be my sponsor because this guy scares the hell out of me, right? So I start looking around the Pacific group for a sponsor, and I see this guy Matt, right? And Matt carries around an address book. Now, an address book, 1981, is like the iPhone 27, right? It's like a big deal. The guy's got an address book. He wears these matching jogging suits. He's got a nice little sports car, and the girls are hanging around him. So I said, Matt needs to be my sponsor. But Matt had been sober for a little while. And I cornered him into a Denny's one night, and I said, and I'm going to impress this guy, right? And I start telling him about all of my philosophy and my opinions and quoting passages out of the book and all this. Matt's listening, you know. And he finally says to me, he says, "Hey, are you finished?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know." He says, "Well, I'm going to tell you something." He says, "You can take all of your opinions and your philosophies and even all your knowledge and all that, you can flush it down the toilet. Because Alcoholics Anonymous is not a thinking man's program. It's a program of action. And the actions that you take today are going to dictate what kind of a human being you're going to be tomorrow. This doesn't make any difference what you think about it." He said, "I'll tell you something else too." He says, "It doesn't even matter if you believe it or not. It only matters that you do it." That guy lasted as my sponsor right up until the last word he said. And that was it. Yeah. I don't want this guy to be my sponsor. I don't want to be telling him what to do. But the point of the matter is, here I am, 42 years later, quoting to you almost verbatim what this man said to me, because it was the gospel as far as I'm concerned about Alcoholics Anonymous. But I couldn't hear it at the time. I know it's the truth. People would tell me the truth, and I'm not ready to hear it. I didn't hear it. But people had said some things at the convention, and one of the things that somebody said, and then you'll hear it often around the rooms, is that Alcoholics Anonymous isn't for people that need it, it's for people that want it. I said, no, it's not for people that need it, it's not for people that want it, it's for people who do it. Do it.
Faith without works is
And
dead.
I don't like that. See, I like theories. But when I'm going into my first wife and I are trying to save our marriage, and we're going into therapy, the therapist had listened to us for a few while, and he finally looks at my wife and he says, concrete, sequential. He turns to me and says, abstract, conceptual. See, I like the abstract. I like concepts. I like ideas. Okay? That's what I play with. You know, I'm a writer. That's what I do. I use ideas, and I develop them in fiction and all this. And it doesn't work around here. Around here, it's just about putting one foot in front of another. And it comes right back to what the guy said to me in the early times, my first sponsor, and he said, the first sponsor that was really a sponsor that I really tried to ask for help with, is he would say things like, he says, if you want to know about alcoholics, and you're going to judge them, and you're going to look at them, and you're going to assess them, whatever you do, and we do that all the time. Of course we do. Don't take anybody's inventory. We're always taking everybody's inventory. He says, watch their feet, not their lips. Where do they go? What are they doing? They sound good in the meeting? You sound good in the meeting. When you were full of shit, you sounded good in the meeting. So what? Are you doing these things? Are you participating? Today in my life, I sponsor guys. I meet with them once a week. If I'm sponsoring a guy, we sit down with a cup of coffee and we start talking. And that's the other thing. I said, if you're new or you're not new, you should get a sponsor. Because every now and then you're going to need to straighten your sponsor out, right? Sponsors need to be straightened out, right?
Sure.
The reality of it is, and I say that to guys when, a friend of mine, we're sitting this morning, we're having a cup of coffee, and I'm listening to him. And I debated when I met with him. I said, do I even want to tell him about this thing with my kid, with the cancer thing? Do I even want, and I thought, maybe I just want to listen to him and get out of me. You see, my problem is me. Okay? The book talks about those things. It says we have met the enemy. The enemy is us. It's not the bottom, it's the symptom. It says selfishness and self-centeredness. That, we think, is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, we step on the toes of our fellows. Fear. And then it talks about selfishness. And some of the strongest words in that big book are in regards to selfishness. It says, we must rid ourselves of selfishness or it kills us. God will allow that to happen. My sponsor talks about willful acts of selflessness. So I don't care how you feel. Do what you have to do. No. You can't wallow in your feelings too long. If you do these things, life will change. The guy said to me, he said, the actions you take will dictate what kind of a human being you're going to be. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. Doesn't matter what you think about it. Just do it. And this thing will work. This thing will work in spite of us. Works in spite of me. I always feel great, And, it's like they say, you come in here and say, wait, Mike, you didn't work steps for 2-3 years. Hey, I'm not a how-to guy, man. Don't listen to me. This is not how you do it. I'm a bad example for some of this stuff. It's my story, though. And what I owe to the people in Alcoholics Anonymous when they asked me to share my story is to share my story. It's the one I got, filled with mistakes, filled with blunders, but filled with some success and some joy. Promise this program come true in my life. But I didn't know I even wanted it. See, I didn't know what it looked like. See, I always figured that, you're supposed to, the fear of financial security means you got money, right? I'm insecure. I need something. When I came here, all I wanted was an enabler. I wouldn't have called her that. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted somebody to pay the rent because I couldn't pay the rent. And maybe some scam somewhere where I could rustle up a few bucks, man. That's all I wanted. I'm filled with gifts today. I got 3 kids that call me and talk to me. I talked to my daughter for 5 hours the other day. My relationship with my children is wonderful. My relationship with my ex-wife is good. We talk on the phone, we're cordial, we're polite. We take care of each other. Our kids, we know when something's wrong with them, we show up. I don't work today. I'm retired. I don't have to go to work. I do what I love to do. I do what I'm passionate about. I write books. Okay. Are they getting published? Well, not yet. But I'm trying. It's what I do. It's what I love to do. My wife's in the program as well. We have a wonderful life together. We're filled with a lot of plenitude. We have not only the things we need, we have a lot of extras. We have a cabin up in Vermont. We have money, we have accounts. I was a guy that wanted a hot rod, and a couple of bucks and a scam and an enabler. And I have a wife and a home, and I'm a father with pretty good standing. And I get to come here and share with you guys my story. And one of the most amazing feelings I ever had in my life, I'm going to close with this, is at one point, they called me up and they asked me to come down to this AIC in Waterbury, Connecticut, bring an AA meeting. I brought an AA meeting down here. And I brought friends with me, and oftentimes when I came down there, my friends after a while, they didn't want to go there anymore. It was scary. People didn't want to go to the meeting. They showed up with their heads down on the table. And I told them, I said, look, I'm not here to pronounce you an alcoholic. I'm here to tell you if you belong here or you don't. So, but if you could, just for the sake of the guy that's next to you, if you could be polite. If you could be polite and help them, allow them to hear the message. Nobody said the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting. Nobody. They bolted as soon as it was over. Until after about 10 weeks. And after 10 weeks, one day, after that meeting, everybody stood in a circle and we said the prayer. I just kept coming. I kept coming for this reason, because every time I walked out of there and those doors closed behind me, I knew, but for the grace of God, that I was on the right side of them. Thanks, guys, for listening to me.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate having you.
Yeah.
All right. That was great. So we accidentally gave out raffle tickets to the last meeting. So I'll just say, does anybody need a book? We have big books and 12 and 12s, although we do have some raffle tickets. But I think, I don't know.
Tom's a winner!
We got a big book and a 12 and 12.
Yeah, I'll go 12 and 12.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's all you, Tom. Nice to meet you. This will be for you.
Thank you.
We do also give out coins for various lengths of sobriety if anybody has any time to celebrate. So if you hear your month, please come on up and let us celebrate with you. Is anyone celebrating 9, 10, or 11 months? Jesse, all right. 11 months, I believe. 11 months. Today's the day?
Today's the day, baby.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, bro.
Jesse, 11 months, all right.
Yeah.
Anybody celebrating 6, 7, or 8 months?
Great job, bro.
What do we do? Keep coming. Anybody celebrating 3, 4, or 5 months? What do we do? Keep coming. Anyone celebrating 2 months?
I'm celebrating 3 months.
3 months? All right, Tom. Yeah. Let's see, where we at here?
All right, thank you.
Hey, congratulations. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hope to see you again.
Good job, Tom.
All right. Anybody celebrating 1 month?
Good job, brother.
What do we do? Keep coming. Is anyone just coming back 24 hours to 29 days or the desire to stay sober? What do you got?
I'm
20
28 days.
All right. Did you get a silver coin yet?
I got the 20.
Yeah.
You got the 24, and
Yeah.
you got 28 days today.
28 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got the
Solid.
silver. All right.
All right. Congratulations, Pat. All right. Anyone with a year or more, please raise your hand to show the program works. And if you haven't had a drink today, give yourself and your higher power a hand. All right, and thank you again, Mike. It was great to have you. And would you guys please join me in the Lord's Prayer? Dear Father, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Mike.
Oh, great beat. For a small meeting, no, that was fine. What? That was fine.